Now, there's a new film out, came out last night actually, called Everest. It stars Jake Gyllenhaal. It's been inspired by the real events of the 1996 disaster on the mountain, on the world's highest peak, when, well, sadly, a lot of climbers died. Let's have a look at some of the film this morning.
You, my friends, are following in the very footsteps of history. Something beyond the power of words to describe. Human beings simply aren't built to function at the cruising altitude of a 747. Our bodies will be literally dying. Everest is another beast altogether.
Let's talk to Guinness World Record-breaking mountaineer Vanessa O'Brien, who's here in the studio. Morning. Looking at that, I mean, it fills me with horror and dread just seeing that. And of course, that turned out to be a disastrous expedition. What makes you want to take on these sort of challenges?
Well, you know, high altitude mountaineering is quite unique from other forms of climbing. There is really nothing more challenging to test your abilities, and the satisfaction that comes with being able to meet a goal and a challenge like that is unbelievable. Of course, it takes a lot of training. You have to train up to a year before you can attempt something like that. But the sense of accomplishment that comes from that is unparalleled.
But do you have to battle your own fear when you see the enormity of the task ahead of you? I mean, there must be some nerves.
Yeah, of course. You know, there's always some fear involved, but you know, I think you train for that. I think you stay in control most of the time, and you know, you're prepared for it for the most part. So, you know, you're acclimatizing. These are 6 to 8 week expeditions. So, you know, you're not running up the mountain. You're acclimatizing the whole way. Everest, for example, has 4 camps right after base camp up to the summit. These are, you know, you're there for up to 8 weeks. So, you know, you're tackling these in little tiny bits, and you know, over time, you're becoming more and more comfortable with the conditions.
I noticed you're wearing, well, I would assume is a wedding ring.
Yes.
Right. Now, it's not just about the dangers that you face, it's about the dangers for your family as well. I remember back in, I can't remember when it would be now, 1994, 95, and I interviewed Alison Hargraves, who was from Derby, just when she'd come back from climbing. I don't know what it is she'd climbed, but she'd broken some record climbing some enormous peak, and interviewed her, and everyone was very proud. She set off a few months later for Everest, leaving her husband and a young child behind, and never came back. That has to be the forefront of your mind when you leave home, doesn't it? That you may never come back again.
Yeah, I did just visit the Gillian Memorial in Pakistan on K2, is where she did die, Alison. You know, there is risk involved. These are high risk, you know, sports like race car driving. You know, Hemingway said there were only 3 sports. He picked motor racing, bullfighting, and mountaineering. Yeah. You know, it is high risk, and you know, Everest, interestingly enough, is not the highest risk of the mountains. It's 1 out of 8, or 12%. K2 is much more risky, where Alison did
and
Paris.
And K2 is what you're facing next, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. K2 is where I've just come back from this year, so it's the 2nd highest mountain in the world. That does have a much higher risk ratio than something like Everest. Everest is, say, you know, 1 out of 8, or 12%, versus, say, something like K2, which might be 1 out of 5. Something like that. So the risk statistics, or death to summit, or we like to say, are quite substantially different. So, you know, that has to do because of the avalanches, that has to do because of the conditions, the rock fall, crevasses, weather, you know, all sorts of things. So it's much tougher. So yeah, you know, there's definitely risk involved. I don't want to downplay that in any way, shape, or form, and you can see that even going back to Everest. You know, the reason this film is so interesting is because, you know, that year, 1996, 15 people perished, which was the highest deaths that had happened since 1921. So 17 expeditions took off in 1996. 398 people went for that summit. 98 people would summit in 1996, yet 15 people would die. And people got trapped, with a storm coming in underneath them, and storms normally happen above you. Well, you're so high, you're almost 9,000 meters, you expect storms to happen above you, not below you. So that's how high you are. When the film says you're at a cruising altitude of a 747, well, that's Hollywood's kind of introduction, but remember how high you really are. So, keeping in mind, this is something you really have to train for, you have to be experienced for. And there would not be deaths of that magnitude for another 2 decades. When last year there was an avalanche that killed 17 people, and this year with the earthquake in Nepal that would kill 19 people. So normally a season doesn't see double-digit deaths like that.
I think you're a breed apart, really, a bit like astronauts in that, but you're pioneers in that way. It's fascinating to talk to you, and I've got to say, best of luck with K2.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Really good
Pleasure.
to see you, Vanessa. Thank you.
Cheers.